Hey everybody, it's Damien from Guitar Journey here, and today I'm going to tell you 3 things that you've probably been told that you should be doing on your own guitar journey that you really don't need to be doing. And I'm going to tell you 3 much better things that you can be doing with your practice time instead. And it's not like the things we're going to talk about today are wrong. It's not like they're bad or they're destructive exactly. It's just that they're not the best or most efficient use of your time. There are better, more productive, more musical things that you can be doing, okay? So let's get right to the list, all right? First thing you've been probably told by now is you need to learn your fretboard. You know, wherever you are in your journey, maybe you're just starting out, or maybe you're sort of an intermediate level player that's looking to take things to a much deeper level. At some point or another, in all likelihood, you've read somewhere, somebody's told you whatever, in order to really get command of the guitar, you need to learn your fretboard. And honestly, that's not incorrect. That's not exactly bad advice. But although you do need to learn your fretboard, the question is, how are you going to do that? And that's where most people get off track and end up, frankly, quite frustrated. I've had students come to me with a printout of the guitar neck with all the notes on it. They got it off Google Images or something. And they say, oh yeah, I'm just going to memorize this. That almost never works, okay? And the reason is because even if you could somehow memorize all the notes, just rote memorization like that, you're not going to be applying the knowledge, and as a result, you're not going to retain it, okay? Here's a very important principle that I really want to suggest you have guide all of your learning. I really want you to think about this. In order for any knowledge to stick, you've got to be applying it. In order for any knowledge to really stick and be useful to you, you've got to be applying that knowledge on a regular basis. And that's the problem with trying to memorize stuff in general. Memorization without more almost never works. You almost never retain that knowledge. So don't even bother trying to memorize the notes on the fretboard. It won't work, okay? You won't be able to apply that knowledge. That's almost a certainty, okay? Now, other people are going to tell you, yeah, don't memorize the fretboard. What you really need is to learn this particular system, this big overarching system, and that's going to unlock the fretboard. I bet you've heard those words before. This or that is going to unlock the fretboard for you, okay? I'm not a fan of this approach either. And I admit it's a little bit better than just trying to memorize everything, but these overarching systems are more complicated than they really need to be. And I don't know too many people that study them, and I do know people that study them, but honestly, I don't know too many people that are actually applying what they seem to be learning, okay? And then again, there is that word, apply. Are you learning stuff that will actually show up in your playing, that you'll be able to use in a musical way? With these big systems that promise to unlock the fretboard, a lot of people struggle to actually put it into practice, okay? So that being said, what do I think is the best way to learn the fretboard? What you need to be doing are musically applicable exercises, okay? Maybe you've heard the old saying, drills build skills, but not just any drill. The drill has to be musical in and of itself. And after you get good at the exercise, the drill, you then have to work at integrating it into your own playing. So you need to learn specific musical drills that teach you a certain thing, in this case, the fretboard or a certain section of the fretboard, whatever. But you need to be able to apply the drill that's going to give you that on the fly in your playing. And that's the only way you're going to retain anything, okay? So what I recommend for people, in order to learn the 5th and the 6th strings, for example, you just want to try playing as many bar chord based songs as possible and soloing in these songs using whatever scales you happen to know. And the reason I say bar chords are the best bar chords and scales to solo in these songs are the best way to learn your 5th and your 6th string is because both your bar chords and your scales are going to be rooted on the 5th and the 6th strings. So for example, I can play a D major scale right here with the root note on the 6th string, all right? Or I can play another D major scale right here with the root note on the 5th string. Well, if it's a root note for a scale, it's also a root note for a chord, and vice versa. So if I could play a D major scale with my root note right here on the 6th string, sure enough, I got a D bar chord there. And if I played my root note, my D scale here with the root note on the 5th string at the 5th fret, well, there's my D bar chord there. Okay? So again, I want to reiterate that. If it's a root note for a chord, it's a root note for a scale, and vice versa. And as long as you understand your chromatic scale, therefore, you'll know, the chromatic scale, by the way, it's all the notes we have in Western music, right? C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, that thing, okay? If you know the chromatic scale extremely well, then you can move your bar chords around and you can move your scales around. So remember that D scale I played a moment ago, this one here on the 6th string root note. Right, well I can move it down here and it becomes an A scale. And like I said earlier, if it's a root note for a scale, it's also a root note for a chord. So yeah, I have an A bar chord right here. There's my A at the 5th fret of the 6th string. There's my A bar chord, okay? Playing a bunch of bar chord songs, soloing to them in different keys, great way to learn the 5th and your 6th strings. But that being said, okay, 5th and 6th strings, that's great. What about the 1st through the 4th strings? How do we learn those? Well, there are tons of ways. But again, you just want to be thinking in terms of learning the neck by practicing skills that you're really going to apply in your playing. So for example, how about some double stops up and down the neck? We can practice double stops using parallel thirds on the 1st and the 2nd string, the 2nd and the 3rd strings, the 3rd and the 4th strings. You can do them 4th and 5th, 5th and 6th as well. They just don't sound as nice. And again, you're probably not going to use them as much in your playing. You're probably not going to apply them, okay? But let's play a scale using double stops. How about C major? Life's good in C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. So we can play a C major scale on the 1st and 2nd strings, parallel thirds. Or on the 2nd and 3rd strings. Third and 4th. And so forth, right? I can play double stop parallel 6 on the 1st and the 3rd strings. We're still in C major, by the way. Or on the 2nd and the 4th strings. And of course, you can see in order to play these double stop scales correctly, I need to know not only what are the notes in the given scale, in this case C major, but also where on the fretboard these notes happen to be. So in essence, I'm practicing learning the fretboard even as I play my double stops. And of course, you know, practically speaking, we all know that double stops really, really sound great in your playing. You can use them rhythmically, you can use them melodically. So the upshot of it is, again, we're going to be applying what we are learning. There's a ton more ways to do it as well, real quick. You can play chords up the neck and identify the root note of a given chord. I mean, we all know that's an F chord, but I can move it. If I know my chromatic scale, once again, I know the root note of F is right here, 3rd fret, 4th string, and also 1st fret, 1st string, okay? So I can get this F chord right here, and maybe I'm playing a song that calls for an A chord. And instead of just playing like, you know, your basic open position A chord, I might try to play an A chord up the neck. And again, using my chromatic scale, I go F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. And there's an A chord. And I remind myself that root note is now on the, it is on the 4th string, in this case, 7th fret. So I'm telling myself, okay, I got an A at the 4th string, 7th fret. I got an A at the 1st string, 5th fret, okay? So I'm playing a chord up the neck, looking for a chord up the neck, and keeping an eye on the root note. One more super quick example, I can do the same thing with this chord shape. This is a D chord, D major, in what is called first inversion. And in this shape, the root note of D is actually on the 2nd string right here at the 3rd fret, okay? I can challenge myself. Okay, that's D in first inversion. Maybe I'm playing a song that calls for a G major chord. And again, using my chromatic scale, I say, well, if this is D, within my chord shape, if this is D, then I'm going to say D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, and right here, there's my G major chord. So even as I'm learning some nice chords up the neck, I'm learning the notes on the various strings by keeping my attention on my root notes, okay? Finally, what else real quick? How about playing single string scales? You can do it as an exercise, but you can also just force yourself to improvise on only one string or one or two strings at the same time. And if you do this in enough different keys, playing passages from a given scale, once again, you're going to end up knowing the neck extremely well. When you do this, don't rely on your ear. If you miss a note, stop and ask yourself, where'd I go? Oh, I played this note instead of that note. You know, if I'm challenging myself, let's say, to play in the key of D major, well, I need to know the notes are D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp. And in order to improvise on one string, I can't rely on a given scale pattern, right? A given scale fingering. I have to know where the notes are on that given string, all over that given string. So I'm going to do some kind of scale passage in the key of D major. I've got to identify, let's say, the first string. Well, I've got an F sharp here at the 2nd fret. I've got a C sharp here at the 9th fret. I've got another F sharp right here at the 14th fret. And so I'm going to, work my way down the scale. Let's pretend I'm improvising. Okay, something like that. In all these cases, we're learning the neck, but we're doing so in a very musical way, and that is far superior to trying to just memorize stuff or to learn some big overarching system, okay? All right, what else is bad advice? I hate to say bad advice, but next thing you've probably been told is to learn some music theory, and more specifically to learn the circle of fifths. Now, I've actually done a whole in-depth video on these topics. How much theory do you really need to know? Do you really need to learn the circle of fifths, okay? I'll put the links to those videos in the description below, but in a nutshell, before you start to learn any music theory, you really need to ask yourself, what are your goals? And myself, I want to be honest, I love learning music theory. I think theory is a very, very beneficial thing. I use it all the time, and not only in my soloing, but in my songwriting and my composing. But that being said, depending on your goals, you personally might not be comfortable learning theory, and you might not need to learn all that much of it, okay? If you are someone who's maybe less comfortable with it, again, ask yourself, what do you really need to know to do what you want to do on guitar? Because again, the truth is, just by knowing your chromatic scale and the notes on the 5th and 6th strings, you can play scales all over the neck. I demonstrated that earlier. You can play bar chords all over the neck. I demonstrated that earlier. And you can play some really neat chords, even more advanced chords, extended chords, 9s, 11s, 13s, that kind of thing, just by being able to find a given root note and plug in a given shape. Okay, super quick example. I can play a D major 9 right here, root note on the 5th fret of the 5th string. We talked about that D note earlier, so I can play, there's my really nice D major 9. I can play a nice A13 right here, root note on the 6th string. Very nice, okay? So yeah, I can play some fairly interesting chords just by plugging in a shape, knowing the notes on the 5th and the 6th string, okay? How much theory do you really need? Maybe here's a good way to think about it. The more independent you want to be, maybe the more theory you might want to know, okay? Now, before anybody jumps on me, I'm not saying you can't be creative without knowing theory. Of course you can. But for example, if you want to take a song and start writing in some interesting chord substitutions, maybe reharmonize the song, maybe do some less commonly played soloing ideas, then yeah, learning some theory is going to be pretty helpful. But if you're looking to play stuff in an enjoyable way without altering things or, putting your own 2 cents in, so to speak, too much, you may not need to know much theory beyond the 5th and the 6th string notes. But if you do decide to learn some theory, you're probably going to get told sooner or later that what you need to do is learn the circle of fifths. Like I mentioned, I did a whole video in depth on why I think putting your time and energy into learning circle of fifths is not an efficient way to learn. But the bottom line is, there is, no kidding, no argument, there is some really cool information in the circle of fifths. But the issue I have with it, it doesn't give you any deep knowledge. It doesn't tell you the why behind things. It tells you that, yeah, there are 2 sharps in the key of D major, but it doesn't tell you why that's the case. It tells you C major and A minor are relative keys and therefore have the same notes, but it doesn't tell you why. So the way I look at it, if you're going to put your time and your effort into studying something, then you really want to go deeper than the information that the circle of fifths provides. And ultimately, as I've said before, circle of fifths is kind of like the answer key in your math class. You can look at the answer and that's helpful, but how did you get that answer? Because the truth is, if you have no idea how you got that answer, then you really don't know the material very well. And that's my issue with circle of fifths. You get a certain amount of information, but you don't get the why. And without the why, and this is really important, please take a note of this. Without the why, it is going to be much more difficult to apply that information in your own playing, your own composing, your own songwriting, your own improvisation, and so forth, okay? The why, so to speak, is an important part of our creativity, okay? All right, one last thing really quick. Maybe a piece of, I don't want to say bad advice, maybe inefficient advice. Maybe you're a comfortable intermediate level player. You're looking to get even better in your soloing, and sooner or later, somebody tells you to take the next step forward. What you really need to do is learn triads. And somebody is always out there say, I learned triads and they changed my life. Real quick, if you're not sure what a triad is a note that has a chord that has three different notes. So for example, a C major chord has three different notes. C, E, and G. An E minor chord has three different notes, E, G, and B. And so when people are telling you that you need to learn triads in order to solo better, what they're really telling you is generally that you need to be able to find the notes that make up a given chord on the neck so that you can play those notes in your soloing when that given chord is played, you know. So if I know that an E minor chord consists of the notes E, G, B, I can find those E notes, those G notes, those B notes all over the neck. And when I'm playing a song that has an E minor chord in it, when that E minor chord is played and I'm soloing, then if I hit one of those notes, an E or a G or a B, then when that E minor chord is played, well, then it's going to sound nice, okay? And to be honest, I'm not a fan of this. You probably knew I was going to say that. And it's funny because I say that having actually produced a full video on how to get started using triads. But what it boils down to is that triads can be useful, but for a lot of people, they're quite difficult to apply. I mean, just imagine you have a song that goes E minor to C to G to D, E minor, C, G, D. Okay? Now, really quickly, say the notes that are in each of those chords. Go ahead. And if you're not able to do this, just rattle it off, then I think applying triads is going to be kind of tricky. And yeah, you can just rely on certain shapes, plugging in certain basic shapes in your playing and all that, without knowing the specific individual notes all the time. But that's kind of a superficial way to learn. And when you start changing keys and so forth, it's going to be kind of tricky to apply on the fly. And on top of that, even over a basic triad, like for example, the E minor chord we're talking about, there are actually a lot of other notes that can sound really nice. So I think it's really limiting to restrict yourself to just the individual triad notes. There are a lot more notes beyond just the triad notes that sound really nice over a given chord. So how can triads be useful? Well, sort of as an ear training method, actually. Triads can help you learn to listen for notes that are going to be a little sweeter, a little more pleasing with a given chord. Okay? That being said, I don't think too many people are really playing and chasing after triad notes on the fly. I mean, imagine a chord sequence, going to do a different chord sequence, A minor to C to G to D. Okay, A minor, C, G, D, and it goes something like a... Now imagine somehow, with 2 beats per chord essentially, you're supposed to be calculating what the triad notes are and you're supposed to be landing on them comfortably. Not many guitarists playing popular music, rock, whatever, do it that way. Over that same sequence, what you really want to be doing rather than thinking about triads is letting your ear guide you to the right notes. So instead of trying to memorize triads, much better approach. If you're going to use triads, use them to develop your ear to look for those sweeter notes. But again, are they going to be just a triad note? That sweeter note could be a 7th or a 9th or whatever. And, you're going to find those notes within a given scale fingering, okay? I just don't think triads, for the express purpose of using them in your solos as a guide for your solos, is really the best use of your time, okay? All right, let's summarize. If you've been told that you need to memorize the notes on the fretboard, or study the circle of fifths, or learn triads all over the neck. I personally don't think those are the best approach. What should you be doing instead? Specifically targeted, musically applicable, musically useful drills. So for example, with respect to learning the notes on the neck, as we said, practice stuff like double stops, chord shapes all over the neck, single string scale passages, and so forth. Instead of trying to learn circle of fifths, start by making sure you know the chromatic scale extremely well. Then learn how to assemble a major scale, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Then learn about relative keys. Then learn about the chords that you expect to find in a given major key and a given minor key. That'll give you a much deeper knowledge base. You'll really start to understand the why behind things, and understanding why will help you to use that knowledge in a much more creative manner. Finally, somebody has told you to learn to play triads all over the neck for your soloing. Well, again, they can be useful if you're using them as an ear training exercise, or if you're using triads rhythmically, chords all over the neck. But in terms of your soloing, maybe not the best approach, okay? I don't recommend you spend a huge amount of time with triads because very often the chords are going to be flying at you too fast, too quickly, and it's going to be difficult to apply them. Get used to using your ear to find those sweeter notes, and you'll be soloing much more comfortably, much more organically, much more smoothly. All right, that's what I have for you today, okay? I hope this helps you maybe straighten out your learning path a little bit. Find a little bit more of a direct path. I always say there are no shortcuts, but there is a direct path to get where you want to be as a guitarist and as a musician, okay? If you liked today's video, please give it a like, and also please subscribe to the Guitar Journey YouTube channel. My passion here at Guitar Journey is to shorten your path, to help you navigate the awesome but sometimes confusing journey that is learning and playing guitar. Okay, so please hit like, please hit subscribe. If you really like today's video, please buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee at the link in the description below. And finally, please feel free to leave a comment. I really believe we're building a community here, and I would love for us to have a forum where we can have intelligent, respectful discussions, and in that way, we can all learn from each other and enrich all of our individual guitar journeys. Thanks so much. Have a great day.